But okay, we're going to kick off at 7 o'clock. I'd like to be on time. 60 minutes of amazingness ready to come upon us. So, listen, everybody, congratulations on entering the new year. And I am going to say it, even though people will roll their eyes, and I have a few more days to say it. Happy New Year. Ha 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 ha. I said it. Can't take it back. Yes. Thank you, Katie.
Here for that.
I was frowned upon for saying it recently, and it was only like, I don't know, the second week of January. I said, if I have a chance to offer happiness for another few weeks, I'm going to do it. So, Happy New Year to everybody. And I hope you're well. The Myths of Sports Performance book was an extension of the Myths of Sports Coaching, which had so much traction, so much incredible input, so many um, people offering not just their research, the practical examples that people influenced NGBs, curriculum design, coaching, coach development. And then this book came out and we thought, we've got a list that people have said, why hasn't this been in there? Why hasn't this been in there? To then be able to go to these four amazing people and to get this kind of chapter, which I am giddy about because it is a chapter that resonates with me in the work that I've done, in the world that I have been in experienced with all different hats. So something will resonate with everybody in the room today. And it isn't just because of the brilliance that we have here, it's because the authenticity that they're also going to bring and the experience. So winning matters most in elite sport. The wider book has 42 contributions from different chapter authors, which leads us to two books having 70 incredible researchers and people practical in the field offering insights. This chapter with four incredible people is talking about winning isn't inherently good, celebrating the medal moment. Katie, you had a diagram back in 2012 that you posted online, and I stole it and I shared it with as many people and I credited you to every single time, but it just landed a message and turned a corner in the mindset of loads of different people I was working with, linked to what we're about to talk to this evening. Winning at all costs, the real human costs, redefining success. We're going to get into that with much more detail this evening. So it's with a massive smile, welcome, not just to you listeners, contributors in the chat this evening, coming from everywhere in the world, but to you, Elliott, Cath, Laurence, and Katie. Thank you for your contribution. Thank you for this evening. And over to you, Elliott, for now.
Ah, what an introduction. Thank you. And thank you for the platform, like not just for tonight, but also the opportunity to even kind of write the chapter. It was cool. As soon as it landed in my inbox, I was giddy with excitement. And we have to go right back. It doesn't actually feel that long ago, but it was like 2022, right? And I remember the first person that came into mind was Katie. And then we like chatted about that. And then we grew our group and like to be here and have the opportunity to chat it through with everyone after it's been out for a bit is awesome. So thank you for that. Like really, really grateful for the chance to be with these guys again and to chat to everyone about the chapter and some of the ideas that we put forward in it. We've gone for a no slides, no activity, no presentation approach. We just thought if we just stripped it back and in my mind, it's like a campfire conversation, but without the fire or without the marshmallows, which is a little bit of a shame. But we're going to just interview each other a little bit, and we've been quite intentional about letting each other know what we're going to get at. We're going to talk a little bit around the journey of putting the chapter together. We're going to talk about some of the lived experiences that we've had on the ground with leaders, coaches, athletes, organizations around this idea of winning and the incredible things that you can get from it, but also the cost of it. And then we'll share some ideas around where we think like a really healthy way forward lies. So we know where we're going after, but we've also been quite intentional with not letting each other know exactly what we're going to ask each other. So there's there's room for curveballs. We'll aim to go for like 25, 30 minutes, and then we'll have loads of time and space for people to ask questions. My only thing would be like if you've got questions as we go along, just like pop them in the chat because it might like provoke the conversation as we go along. But yeah, hopefully a good 55 minutes of conversation ahead of us. Anything from you guys before
Nice. I get to start the questioning, don't I?
we do? You do, yeah.
Anything, Katie?
No, I like the
Anything to
jeopardy that was set there, that we're all slightly on it. We think we've got a plan, we're all slightly on edge because it's only a loose plan. So
add?
that's all
So
good.
many. I'm still just sitting here feeling a little bit surreal about being on this panel with you guys, and like, I don't know if those of you tuning in might not know the connections between us, but like, Elliot is like a heroic sports psychology colleague of mine, like who I've had the fortune of co-delivering with within GB hockey. Laurence was an athlete that I was so fortunate to coach like almost 2 decades ago. Is that right? No, just under. And someone that taught me so much. And Kath, like flipping heck, I read your books, your articles, and so yeah, it's pretty surreal. I'll go try and get over that. But thanks so much to all of you for tuning in. I think just to reinforce what you said, Elliot, there, that everyone on this call has clearly got care and an interest in this, and will have lived experiences. I'm seeing Violetta there, like Dean, all of you guys, Kate, please, like, just feel free anytime to come off mute, come off camera, and have this be a really rich conversation between people that care about something important here.
Yeah. And I think if I could push us towards anything, it's just leaving the call with renewed enthusiasm, energy, thoughts, questions. So this isn't like a transaction. Like, we're not going to give you content. That's not the intention here. But we're going to have a conversation that's hopefully stimulating, and you can be part of that as much as you care to be.
And just a little rebuttal to Katie. I mean, you are not out of place in this panel, my dear. You coached me in my Olympic year, the hardest time of my entire athletic career, probably the hardest time of my life. And you're probably the person who's had the biggest kind of sliding doors moment in my career. I think I've ended up here in quite some substantial reason because of you. So good to be here with you as well, Katie. Shall we kick off?
Let's do it.
So I'm going to fire some questions at Elliot to start with. And actually, I checked back to the first email that you sent to Kath and me, Elliot, and you had an idea before you came to us. You'd had an idea, and there was a colleague in the mix, and actually you'd planned some kind of sound like a fairly serious research project, interviewing athletes who'd been winners and those who hadn't quite, and then a research project around that. But and that was back in mid 2022. Do you remember the process that we went through from then? How much do you remember of it? And give us a sense of how it started. You were the instigator, so talk us through how it came about.
Yeah, do you know what? It felt like such a flip. And I don't have any meaningful history in writing, academic or otherwise. I've been really fortunate enough in the jobs that I've done where I've been like put in a position of, my old line manager, John Alder, used to call it thought leadership. And he used to do a lot of emphasis on like the way in which you construct ideas and put ideas out there. And my role within like the Olympic, Paralympic system was a bit like that. So I'd had experiences doing that, but I just remember this sense of like, I can't write anything. Like, that's not me. So I think my go-to was, all right, well, I've just got to like hide behind formality, behind research, behind like rigorous processes in which I can like I guess evidence what I felt was right. Like, I probably would have ended up coming to very similar conclusions to where we got to. But the initial thought was, all right, I'll make this a research project and almost kind of like prove that I'm thinking straight and prove that this stuff's real. And I was really lucky that the role that I had at EIS and UK Sport like gave me opportunity at least to go and speak to a wide range of athletes, wide range of coaches and leaders. So that was the initial idea. But that went very quickly, I think.
Well, you had a colleague, somebody you had in mind to do it with, dropped out, which, unless that was Katie and then she came back in, I don't know if is that the case?
I think I did initially say no because I didn't have time to do it justice. And then I was like, oh my gosh, he's gone and got Kath and Laurence. That's too good. Oh,
I didn't know about this, actually.
Yeah, we'll find a way.
This is kind
That
of
was
all
my
a bit of
attempt to say
learning.
no. Yeah.
I was reading back through the chat from them and Katie, and yeah, you did say, but in fairness, it wasn't a lack of energy or enthusiasm for it. It was just purely a time thing. Like, you were doing your
She
own
didn't
writing.
want to do a massive research project, basically. happy to write some thoughts down, but interview athletes and yeah, go on. So that what how did that how did you come to selecting or to finding this little crack squad?
So Katie was the first person that I went to. And then it was in and around that time we were starting our hockey journey, right, Katie? So we were spending a bit more time with each other. I was doing some system work, and on my own little leadership journey and trying to push some of these ideas in practice as much as it was writing about the chapter. And Katie and my line manager, John, who I'd mentioned, were like real kind of mentors for me. And I think the message that I got from both of those was like, think bigger and don't hold yourself back. And that was probably the bit where I think probably through just their own brilliant way of being and their own brilliant way of talking, just kind of made me feel like it was okay to be really bold. So I was like, all right, well, if we were going to be bold, what might bold look like? And your book was on my shelf, Laurence, absolutely knackered because I read it about 50 times, and half yours was there as well. And we'd not so long beforehand got you involved with some pathway stuff where you came and spoke at one of our events. And Laurence, we'd been doing some stuff with TAP, and I was like, it's kind of cool that my vision of what bold would look like were people who I had their numbers in my phone. So yeah, we pushed and went with that and got in touch with you guys, and like the energy was there. So it was really good to be able to get that. And from that point, I don't know whether we actually discussed the research project in any meaningful detail. I think we stuck that one in.
Well, Kath's first email back was, that sounds like a lot of work and we haven't got many words in the chapter. So I think that was within an email that might have been squashed.
Yeah, yeah. And I think what that gave room for, which I think is what makes a lot of what we're saying quite meaningful, was it gave space for story. And
Mm.
that's the bit that I really like about our chapter. I think like what it gave me was permission to not invalidate the stories that I'd heard from so many different people in our Olympic and Paralympic system, and not kind of write those off as not evidence, you know?
Mm.
So yeah, I think it just set us off in a direction where, for those of you that have read the chapter, will know that it's quite colloquial. We lean on personal experiences, we lean on narrative, we lean on autobiographic accounts and things like that, and that was all very intentional.
And do you want to give everyone, maybe the last question for me, do you want to give everyone an idea of the kind of whale oil, whale grease ship that this writing project was, and how we just intuitively did everything that you led us just so? Do you want to just give people an idea how did poor people write a chapter
Yeah,
like this?
it's great for those in the audience. I was consistently referred to as the pen holder, which basically put me in a position of like administrative and organizational responsibility that those that know me well will know is not my strength. So I think if you were to do a analysis of all of our text and emails and everything else, I reckon about 85% start with the line, "Sorry for the delay." Uh, so we were in like a really nice place, because I was looking back and like just there were loads of gaps, but it never felt like that looking back. It felt like we were consistently like in contact, or at least merging some of these ideas. And Kate probably had a lot of, because we were together a lot in hockey, but it didn't feel like there were huge gaps. It took us, so when you start July 22, submitted September 23. So I mean, it's a long old time for 4,000 words. But and lots of drafts and lots of edit. But I think one of the things I look back on, I think what we did really well was we did break things off and go in silos. And at times it was like a bit of a relay, where I'll grab the baton, I'll run and do my bit, and then I'll hand over to Katie and vice versa. But it never felt separate. And I think probably the bit that I look back on that we did really well was like we invested time in like being quite authentic and open and vulnerable with each other about what our beliefs about this were. So we could break off and write different bits, but I never felt like I was just writing a perspective from my point of view, and then you guys would write yours. Like I have been part of co-written chapters before, And it does really feel sometimes that you're just writing your bit, but every word felt like it was written by one of us, but representative of all of us.
Hmm. Nice. Who do I get to pass the baton on to? Cath. There
Me,
you go,
yeah.
Cath.
I'm feeling at some point like, you held the pen, but I kept at the end going, can we just look at that again? Can we just think that through? So I do know that I probably was the most painful going, it's almost the last draft, but if we just clarify that a bit more. Yeah,
And
I
you were
think
so good at that, by the way, Kath. Sorry to interrupt. You were so
Yeah.
good at that. And all of your incredible writing experience really helped this because it would have been a very, very poor version if it was just left to me to be the editor, like you really nailed that down into some really good writing.
I don't know. I think some of my sort of obsessive, it's not quite there yet, sort of mastery, we'll call it, came out. Yeah, I think one of the things just when you were talking about when we're initially saying, what's this going to look like? What evidence do we use? Because there's so much evidence we could bring in. All four of us had like a real visceral experience of this myth, and yet from slightly different experiences or different sports or different parts of of our sort of life in sport. And I think a lot of the energy came from coming back to that core, didn't it? Of actually what we've seen, and that's a little bit what I want to kind of explore with you, Katie. I absolutely it was so valuable having your 20 years plus world leading sports psychologist working up close and ahead of the curve, I think, to really put this into practice. I think it's a myth lots of people know cognitively but aren't still quite sure what it means in practice. And I think that's probably why we've still got people, it feels it's not a new idea anymore, but we're still all on this call because we kind of still know that the cognitive awareness of this being a myth doesn't always translate into the into the sports place itself. And that's what you have such a sort of up close experience of. So I want to just ask you a little bit about that, really, about, let's dive in. What is it that happens to an athlete or to a team when they are only valued for winning in the narrowest of senses of crossing the line first?
Yeah, it's so true, isn't it, that it's not a new idea, which is a really good thing. And what I think is confusing for some of us is like winning is amazing, and we open the chapter with that. So winning is awesome, but not all wins are equal, not all losses are equal. And my first sort of experience of this was probably actually like my own individual experience as a gymnast. I was a relatively elite gymnast from the age of about 8 through till 15 or 16 and trained 30, 40 hours a week. Didn't go to school very much. It was all I loved. Absolutely loved it. As a mum of a 6-year-old and a 2-year-old now, I look back and think, flipping heck, I don't know if I want them to be as invested. But my experience of being in a gymnastics environment where winning, I wouldn't have had the language to know it back then, but winning was the currency, and scores in particular, and closeness to perfection. And over the years, I mean, over almost a 10-year period, I went from being happy, confident, loving the sport to being a bit of a shell and actually falling out of love with the sport and being so consumed by fear. I think that's one of the things that it brings in the most, is that it then creates that sense of fear, because whether psychologically or just on some level, you know that you can't control the win as much as we might like to think, and as much coaches might like to think that they're super clever tacticians and all the rest of it is not entirely in our control. So then if you're operating on a daily basis with a high level of fear, then sort of different behaviors start to creep in around, could be perfectionism, fear of making mistakes, then playing it safe. You start to justify hidden costs, and enjoyment starts to drop, and then you may get on a podium and all you feel is relief that it's, thank God it's over now. And we all know just that the path to a triumph or a win of some sort is 99% of the journey, and the moment on the podium is so fleeting. And we reference Tom Mitchell, an incredible human being and athlete, in the chapter where he talks about the emotions that come with a win or a loss are fleeting, but the deep, enduring sense of following your values, of challenging yourself to see what you're capable of building relationships with people that can last a lifetime,
that's like the long win, that's the deeper win. And so, God, I've forgotten what your question was already. What what does it do to,
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. Yeah. What does it do? It creates this fear, doesn't it, that
yeah,
actually constrains performance in the end.
yeah. One, it constrains performance and or reduces thriving and ultimately
Yeah.
shrinks what sport is capable of bringing to society.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
So tell us a bit about what sort of work do you do to what would you do with the team to help them think, reframing winning? And there's a question just sort of come in about, hang on, is there a danger that we're somehow setting a standard of mediocrity? I think that the word only is important, isn't it? It's that
Yeah,
it can't only be crossing the line first when that's something you can't control when there were so many external factors involved, including luck, including,
yeah,
all sorts of injuries and referees and the chaos, the jeopardy that we all love sport for. So it's something about it's not that can't be the only measure, isn't it?
yeah.
But what might you do with a team to kind of reframe winning?
Just on, I have a terrible habit of not answering the question that's being asked, but just on the one I haven't read the chat, but the one about mediocrity or is I think it's natural to worry that we are advocating that message, but in fact I'd argue the opposite because if what actually saying is let's focus more on what we can control, then those things are things like your attitude, your effort, your preparation, the quality of your learning, the speed of your learning. Yeah, that then actually you're driving higher standards, not the opposite. You're giving yourself an increased chance of winning, not the opposite, and you're giving yourself an increased chance of thriving, all of which
Yeah,
we care about. So I think it's natural to worry about that, and it's good to talk about that. But actually, I feel very confident from my
yeah.
experience. It's the opposite. I think it's
Almost like there
phenomenal.
are multiple myths within this myth, aren't there?
Yeah,
And that's one of them, that somehow if we don't talk about winning all the time, well, it means we want to lose, or
yeah,
again that rather than hang on, we've got to we're not thinking about actually what's possible and
yeah.
the kind of the bigger, yeah, all the other things in play.
Yeah. I think
Yeah,
was it Elliot, you used the phrase like the plucky lo we're not trying to be like, soft and like
yes,
it's not about the plucky loser. It's kind of trying to go beyond that winning losing language to look at the value that's actually created in the performance or in the journey. Um, so in terms of what I think it's really hard. From when I first trained as a sports psychologist, I have to confess, like, I just wanted to help athletes win. That's where I started from 20 years ago. I was like, flipping heck, that looks amazing. I didn't manage to do that as an athlete. I want to help everyone else achieve that. And then when you are, so fortunate to be in that kind of inner sanctum with athletes and coaches, and you hear more about their journey, and you start to realize there has to be something more than the win. The work is countercultural because, as you've said yourself, Kath, I've read in some of your articles, like if an athlete finishes fourth, they don't get invited to give a talk at the local school or come and do a business speech or this, that, the other. That there are consequences to not winning. Just that it's like, yeah, it's so confusing because every message from social media and even just, I always remember there was an athlete that I coach currently, a professional rugby player, one of the best in his position in the world, and he said when he was younger and his team won, he felt like his dad gave him a tighter squeeze of congratulations afterwards. And on some level, he sort of interpreted that that meant he loved him more. And that's like he can intellectually, he's in his 20s now, and look back and be like, I'm sure it wasn't that he was just euphoric, like everyone loves a win. But the
Mm,
misunderstandings that perpetuate that
mm,
then mean when you come in as a coach, a psychologist, whoever, to try and encourage this different view, it is really hard. And I found it to be the hardest and most meaningful work that I've done. I mean, things like, well, first of all, I think just naming it, having it be something that we talk about, keeping multiple scorecards so that we're not just measuring off the win or the loss, but as leaders in a sport, we're measuring off the human development, the levels of well-being and levels of thriving. That we don't just look at in how we review, we don't just ask like, yes, we can ask what went well and what would we repeat, but we can also ask what are the behaviors that you're proud of here? What are the signs of growth that you want to celebrate? Where were you courageous? And where did you choose the right thing, not the easy thing? And so thinking how we set our goals and how we review the process, but most of all in how we behave towards each other in a high performance system, in the love and care that we hold for each other as people first and athletes second, is so subtle but so powerful. I
Mm.
realize like we could probably talk forever on this, so I'm going to stop
Yeah,
myself.
and I mean that for me is one of those things that it enables us to bring a quality to winning, i.e.,
Mm,
it's not a sort of binary purely numerical thing.
yeah,
As you said, some wins are worth more than others. Lance Armstrong crossed the line first 7 times, but that's
yeah,
not the quality. That's not enough of a measure. And some of those more extreme examples, though, are helpful logic, I think, to kind of understand, well, in that case, we know that that isn't what success looks like. So what are the factors then that pushes us more into then this area of thinking about it does the story around it, the values we represent, what it means, the message we're giving to society around it. These factors then sort of start to come in, don't they? So we're thinking kind of quality, quality, quality all the time. And I guess, in that area you were touched on about, identity, like, am I of more worth to my father in that example you gave? That is
mm,
this very, another myth within this almost that winning can sort of make you of more human value, which again has no sense. And I personally struggle with that as well, the sense that I got treated differently after a race if I won it before. So it was almost as if I got on with a certain amount of human value onto the plane to go to the rowing regatta. And then 2 days later, my human worth on this planet had either gone up or gone down. And that triggers then a lot of really damaging processes around fear, then what that performance means in the future, given that you can't control many
yeah,
aspects of the outcome. Yeah, the joy, the risk taking, the ability to innovate, the ability to, connect with people around you. There are so many things, aren't there, that then kind of tie into that, the different layers. We're sort of starting to get into what we were going to chat about, Laurence, aren't we?
Mm.
yeah.
I just
Let's go
remembered just
there.
quickly, Kath, we had a conversation a little while back where you were sharing that exactly that about how your feeling of your worth would change depending on winning or losing. And I had the opposite experience. I had a coach all the way through to Olympic level who just was just pure, it was just love all the way through. So that love and care was just absolutely there. It was very much a father figure for lots of us, and it was just very clearly like it was so interesting that we just had this absolutely polar opposite experience of
Mm.
how much so kind of how much we worth after we win or we lose. Mm.
Yeah, and I really envy you that. And
Mm.
there's part of me that also thinks I think my performance could have been better in that kind of environment. And what a shame I'll never get to sort of test that out. But I
Mm.
really know a lot of my energy was drained by managing all of the things that sort of context, that winning is the only thing that matters, your value is tied to it. I know how much sort of energy, mental energy, emotional energy that took that clearly wasn't going into making a boat go faster. So,
Mm.
yeah. And
And I
what's
wonder, I wonder if I would have had just my mindset, my kind of attitude for most of my career, if I would have had a much darker experience had I
yeah.
been in your kind of environment. Like, what would I
Mm.
have done to myself or to other people had I not had that kind of support and care in my coach?
Yeah.
Brilliant. We've had a number of questions in the chat. I'm kind of torn because I think some of them might get answered in this next section. So I wonder if we discuss the model and we can return to these questions, or the people that ask them can come back to us if there's anything that hasn't been answered. I'll repost the model because this was really, as we started to story tell when we played around with this idea of thought leadership, and it was a time in my life certainly where I was well into this idea of mental models. So we'd kind of like landed on I guess an opportunity within this chapter to try and forge something that might have some visual representation of some of these ideas. Cath, you'd had for a few years out already a very successful book on long-wind thinking, and that was really pushing a lot of the narrative in this performance or well-being kind of conversation that was happening within organizations and within sports, but also quite publicly in the media as well. And Laurence, your stuff with Sam and True Athlete, and in your book in particular, around trying to pave a way on a way in which athletes might be able to engage with a life in sport and what that might be able to offer them. It felt like our opportunity was really, do we discuss these two ideas in separation? But there was so much synergy between them that it just seemed to make sense to combine them. So we ended up with this pretty little picture, which you'll see in the chat. So I guess my first question to you both is like, as you look at this now, like what's your thoughts on reflecting a couple of years down the line about the way in which we brought your two individual ways of thinking together?
It's what we still do, isn't it? It's how we work. It's how, we've only become closer, really, haven't we? I think
I was going to say
re
it's a reason why
reinforced.
we work very closely together and more actually these days, Kath. And I
Yeah.
don't know if that was the catalyst, but there's some good reason for it.
Yeah, and I think so. The True Athlete Project and the Long Win are yeah, go together like this, and almost the different layers give you, maybe a different conceptual level, if you like. So it encompasses the kind of taps, three pillars, and that outer ring. So performance, well-being, social impact. And that's a way in which, so you might want to use that in terms of a scorecard. You might be thinking, again, and we see, I mean, there are so many more examples in elite sport. And I think in Paris 2024, we saw it much more, where these three are part of the way athletes behave, whether it's, I don't know, the Alex Yee, if we look at Alcaraz and Zinner, they're living this, again, this care for what's the impact I have, not now just as, I'm advertising a brand, but social impact. What do I care for? What am I role modeling to the next generation, to those watching? This sense of, what I stand for in the way I race, the values and how I treat my competitors, all of that sort of thing. I think we have so many good examples of those three in the work of the True Athlete Project, whether it's the mentoring program, whether it's working with NGBs now, trying to think about their social impact. So think about the purpose of a national governing body much more in terms of what are you doing for society, not like how many members have you got and how many medals you're winning at the next Olympics. It's just absolutely core to the work that you do, isn't it?
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't know if I have much to add there, but it's nice. Yeah, nice way of framing it. The scorecards. I hadn't heard you talk about the scorecards before, Katie, but I love that as well.
I mean,
And yeah,
everybody
you
wants to
could.
measure winning, don't they? So, what we're saying is you can have more than one measure, basically. It's a pluralist kind of view of success. And so that you've got,
This is also just the last thing. This is what sport can offer the world. It can
yeah.
offer us kind of development in these areas for individuals, for teams, for communities. So it's both the thing that the athlete that we can focus on for athlete development, for environments, but it's also what sport has to offer the world.
And I think the thing we're understanding more, Katie, you probably see this in practice, is that these three areas, they don't detract one from the other, despite sometimes, accusations that, some athletes should just stay in their lane and focus on their sport. But what you see is, the social impact brings meaning. It brings that intrinsic motivation. I'm not just doing it for the medal. The medal has to mean something, actually, for you to really be creative in that moment of utmost pressure or regulate your emotions. It's important if the well-being is critical to sustaining high performance, you can't perform in fear. So I think that's I hope where there's a bit more understanding now that it's not sort of tick boxy. This is essential to performance. All of these things are very interlinked. And if we just sort of work quickly through the next level, the three C's I talk about in the long win, the clarity, the constant learning connection, I use those all the time as a way of building different thinking patterns because we all have the ingrained thinking pattern that is I've got to win, it's the only thing that matters. I've heard it in the movies and maybe I've heard it at school, and there are people in our sports environment still saying it. So how do I get out of that? And these I've just, yeah, for a decade or more found really useful for myself as well, to reframe things at the end of the career, to say clarify what else matters. Yeah, of course I'd love to be at the top of the podium, but other things matter too. And it just opens that up. And whenever you're sort of, again, your lens gets very narrow, it's that, hang on, let me just clarify for a minute. There's something else that matters about this competition or about, how I'm facing, the next training period or whether I'm doing. So it's, and that broadens you then back out almost to the outer ring. the constant learning is the way in which we are not dropping our standards at all. And it's the commitment to learning, it's bringing in the mastery piece that enables us to really explore what we're capable of, rather than potentially even just sort of doing things for the short term win. They mean we're not developing as an athlete to, to our full potential, and connection, the people. Yeah, we can't succeed on our own. We need that trust, whether it's with coaches or team members. That becomes really critical. So I see the three C's as building the thinking patterns to enable us to be thriving, performing, and having that positive outward social impact. And then the mindset, behaviors, relationships, again, making sure we are being really ambitious. These are the things that bring the quality to what we do. And that, I think, I really noticed a shift towards the end of when I was competing a long time ago. We're not going to win purely by doing more, even though I'm in a sport that loves to do even more. If we could possibly do some more kilometres of rowing, we'll try and do it. But it simply isn't going to be the reason we win. It's the quality of what we do. And then again, the mindset, the behaviours, the relationships are what bring the quality into the environment. They're what help us to thrive, build greater trust, show more vulnerability. All of those things then, again, helping our performance, the impact out externally, and our well-being. And then coming back to you, Laurence, the mindfulness base is the True Athlete project, this sort of unique element of your approach, and maybe say a bit more about why.
Yeah, it's the kind of the thread and the foundation of everything we do at TAP, because this is really nice. I mean, what I enjoyed coming back to this model was with mindfulness as this kind of catalyst, enabler, heightener of every other ring in there. So the ability to be aware of what's happening for you internally in your life, and just noticing non-judgmentally is the thing that can enable relationships, and you can build your aware mindset on top of, and kind of follow your values, your behaviors, and yeah, all the way out to the outer ring. I won't go through it all, but it connects so deeply to performance, to your well-being, and to kind of the type of impact you want to have on the people around you. So I was quite pleased, actually, coming back to your question. I think we've answered all of your questions now, haven't we, Elliot? But coming back to your question, I was quite pleased to see the model again and feel like, yeah, actually, it still lands, and it still works. I mean, it's not been based on a big research project, but yeah, it fits, and I like it, and I think there's no overlap. It does work as concentric circles.
It grounds the work we do, doesn't it, increasingly? And I think, can remember sort of Laurence, you and Sam Parfit as well at the True Athlete Project, saying how often people are expecting the mindfulness to be a bit tricky, and sort of coaches thinking athletes won't be into it, or performance directors thinking coaches won't be ready for it. But then each time when you really create that environment, people, of course, we're humans, we're wired to need mindfulness, perhaps more than ever because of the sort of busy digital world we're in. We see people just, sink into it, want it, crave it, feel joy through it, feel a sense of connecting that they've been looking for. And that's borne out, isn't it, time and time again.
Mm. Yeah.
It's shown up for me in practice, Laurence, recently with a team I'm working with, where a lot of the players that I work with now, we use mindfulness without using the word, and a lot of it is more just awareness of self. So we
Mm.
Mm.
direct it with questions like, "What are you noticing? How are you showing up today?" Those kind of things. So like it's gone into a football club. Maybe we could have a whole different chat about how this plays out in a football club. But one of the things I've noticed is like an initial resistance to this kind of stuff. But if you package it up in different ways, people do, as Kath said, have like a leaning in towards it, because there's a curiosity about self that I think people implicitly have. And regardless of whatever performance environment you go in, like the win might be the goal, but growth is the goal as well.
Mm.
And I
And of
think
course, flow, if we want to get into this beautiful flow state, which is associated with our peak, those moments of peak performance, then that's a much better route than I'm really tough and I'm gonna win whatever happens. That ain't getting you anywhere near flow. So there's that sense, isn't there, that in the psychological theory and practice.
Yeah, must
And almost one of the things we love in sport is the mind games, and that awareness of what I'm thinking when I'm in pain or when I'm under pressure. And it's so much of why we do sport, I think.
yeah, yeah. I think those things in the inner circle around like relationships, mindset, behaviors, they can facilitate or they can inhibit
Yeah.
that mindfulness, that joy, that satisfaction. Like even just in the way people might, you work in an environment that facilitates like a deficit lens on everything. Like I still remember years ago, a canoe athlete said to me after her IDP meeting, she left feeling a bit flat, and I'd asked her, "Well, what's up?" And she went, "It's a long time to not be good enough yet." And she was really uninspired by her plan, and everybody thought that they were building her up, and she was just like, so even just that deficit mindset view of the world, like really gets in the way of people being able to thrive and fully embrace their journey, just in the same way that resistant behaviors or avoiding relationships and connections can stop these thriving experiences. So I've certainly found this since, this was you guys did brilliant work in bringing this together as part of the chapter as a practical tool for me as a psychologist on the ground. I feel that's great utility.
I wonder, shall we, I've been like semi-distracted by some of the amazing questions coming in. I wonder, shall we, I can't remember what was next in our structure, but shall we jump to the questions or
Yeah, no, I think we're at that point, aren't we? Yeah.
what do we, shall we go? I mean, just,
The Reddit
oh,
approach is upvotes. Mustard has got 5
yeah,
upvotes for his
that,
question.
I'm noticing that. So, yeah, the feeling that this myth is progressively being dispelled with athletes, but just wondering the panel's reflection or all of it, yeah, on dispelling this myth with coaches and support staff when their jobs are often on the line, when individuals or teams don't win in the medal or trophy sense. That's a pretty powerful question.
Mm. It's an interesting one because I think for me, the athlete is closest to the performance, and
Mm,
therefore they see the value of this. They feel it, they see it, they experience it, they know it. They need this in order to deliver under pressure. And the coach is almost that sort of one layer away from what it feels like to race and what's needed for that. And they, of course, are closer to this hierarchy. And I think the metrics then play into this. That, actually you want not just the athlete to have this sort of plural view of success. You need the organization, you need that backed up. And so, I almost wonder if some of the myths are also more ingrained for coaches. So that this would be total supposition, but how a coach becomes a coach and the path they've gone on and what they think their job is about. I wonder if it's almost the closer association, ironically, than an athlete. Because in fact, as an athlete, you're probably quite humble and think I'm really unlikely to win, however good I am. So I've got probably an early reckoning that although I might be very motivated, I'm also going to have lost a lot. And I wonder if sort of almost the coaches ironically have a kind of closer association with winning. It'd be really interesting to sort of find a way to
yeah,
explore that. But this issue of metrics I see in non-sporting organizations as well, that means we can't value stories, we can't value
yeah,
quality, and yet that's what kills us in the end anyway. That's what stops, because it's the stories of an athlete suffering or somebody in a workplace leaving the job because they hate it. That hits our simple metrics, but because there's a slight delay and it's a little bit harder to put in a spreadsheet, we somehow aren't so good. I do see a shift towards people understanding that the long game, if you want to retain people, if you want an athlete to have a long career, if you want to have people staying in your sport, watching the events, then all of these things are really essential. But it's not traditionally what you've discussed in a boardroom. Again, go up to boards and national governing body boards think that we've got this money and the deal is we've got to deliver this number of medals. So it's almost in those areas that I think this message
yeah.
hasn't got into that space enough or really had the rigor of debate around it. It's really interesting.
I I'm totally with you on that. And I actually sit here with a level of high discomfort around this question because it's and like 20 years into my career, a current regret. I would have to acknowledge that I feel like I've underestimated and under supported head coaches in particular across my career. And that not through like a lack of care, but maybe a lack of recognition of the suffering that they're going through and the mental health concerns that often come with head coaches, is a really significant concern of mine. And there's more, almost like you're saying, Kath, there's more, potentially more challenge for them, not least, and not to go too deep and meaningful on it, but what I've noticed so far is often there's like some kind of psychological wound from earlier life that the head coach is operating with some kind of, I have to prove I'm good enough. And so they have so much skin in the game with the results of a team or an athlete. They're over-identified with the performance. And they will often, if an athlete wins, they're just like, don't actually take that much ownership. If an athlete loses, they take massive responsibility. So there's a real skew in that. But they're also less likely to seek help. Most head coaches that I've worked with will push me towards the system, the culture, the athletes. And it is really flipping hard to get them to actually focus on themselves and actually recognize that they're a performer as well and they are worthy of support and that their well-being and how their family feel about their involvement in sport, it matters too. And that when, if, for example, they are fortunate to coach an athlete or a team to a black and white definition of success on a podium, yeah, are their kids part of that journey? Is their partner also proud of that, or has it come at such a high cost? And it just jumping slightly that it's really interesting. I've noticed in the Olympic world, a question is now coming in that all sports have to be assessed against, where athletes answer a question from UK sport around broader social impact. So exactly what's in our model here in Cath and Laurence's work. But it's interesting that that question and that level of assessment has been dropped in without, to my knowledge, any discussion in advance about how might you do that, what support might you need. And as a psychologist in the system, I had quite an emotional reaction to it because I was like, flipping X, and now you're going to start judging that with no additional resource or support. Or it's not, I mean, I'm hugely pro that, but it's interesting if we start measuring and assessing before we've actually conceptualized and
Mm.
allowed coaches to think about what their role is in that, because most head coaches are thinking, flipping heck, and when their working hours are insane. And now we want them to also have a broader social impact.
And
So,
also almost assuming social impact can be measured sort of as a score in
yeah,
this. And also, I think there's a huge sort of sense that this is the athlete, and then I'm thinking, but the coach has a role in society, a really, really powerful role. So can we also give them a space to explore what that might mean, whilst also being aware that, I guess for our change to take place, we need coaches not to be purely technical,
yeah,
tactical
yeah,
experts,
yeah,
which is typically what they've been hired for 20 years ago and praised for and promoted for. We want them to take on the huge responsibility, the exciting opportunity of developing a person that they
yeah.
spend huge amount of hours with, and potentially a very young person, and
Mhm.
that is potentially the most key part of their role. And of course, that's if a coach isn't supported to develop those skills or even feel that's the job they signed up for, we come back to almost Mustafa's question opens up that, I think we see coach development radically shifting, but we're very much in a transition place without real clarity, perhaps from the very top about where we're going.
Yeah, yeah.
I thought Dan's question actually I was going to come back to because some of these are amazing questions that I
Yeah,
need
they
3 hours
are.
to think about.
Yeah.
Mm. And Dan's question is also interesting, but it's a very thoughtful question. But it's one I've had a lot. This sense, have you struggled to bring athletes along with you who are so focused on winning? It's sort of like, not really, because this is your best way to explore what you're capable of and sustain it. So we're not saying winning doesn't matter. We're saying it's a part of something even bigger, even more exciting that makes your journey towards being the best you can be on race day more fulfilling. So it's a yes and. And most will kind of go, oh, that sounds a lot better than the sort of bashing myself, route that I've been on until now, kind of thrashing myself, I'm not good enough, I'm not good enough. And actually I'm sort of starting to kind of crater down with my performance. So, I think it makes sense because we all want to feel what we're doing is meaningful. So quickly people go, oh yes, I can get meaning too. Yes, definitely. I'd really love that because I'm a human being and I want my journey to be meaningful and I know how much risk I'm taking and I'm putting my life in this. So, I think Laurence, you'd probably sort of say that as well from like the mentoring program, the mentors at the True Athlete Project. There's,
I
it's
was
all about
actually
enriching, isn't it?
I was thinking that that's how I turned up to Katie when we first met, was that kind of
Mhm.
athlete who was just entirely winning focused. Like there was nothing else. And it blew your mind, I think, a little bit, like how like crazy this guy is. And yet it was a matter of weeks, or I call it like a single sentence, but it was so sharp, so quick, the shift when I understood what Katie was trying to tell me about you don't have to beat yourself up. It doesn't have to be life or death or your entire identity on the line. So that's the point. I could keep all of my competitiveness. I was as fierce a competitor in Rio as I was 8 years earlier. But if I lost, I wasn't destroyed. I didn't lose myself. And that if you offer that to an athlete, I saw that quite quickly. I think, and now I get to see that with our mentees and with lots of athletes through TAP. If you just show it, it makes sense. Athletes will go that way. They'll follow that way. So I haven't noticed much resistance of like, no, I don't want that as well. I want to keep the really horrible feeling. I want to keep losing myself every time because I think that's my edge. Like there is something about an edge, but no. Katie, did you
Well,
see
I've been
that?
really reflecting on what you just shared, Kath and Lawrence, because my initial response when I read that question was like, yes, like, because I think that even just literally today, there's a Premier League footballer that I'm coaching, and he has been like referred to me because of some of his behaviors when he makes a mistake are for the team and for the manager unacceptable. And underneath it, where we've kind of got to, is the sense of like, he feels like he has to make his family proud. And the only way to do that is to be perfect, bluntly, and to never make a mistake. So then when the mistake comes, there's a huge emotional reaction to it that's completely counterproductive to his next decision. And we got to the point where and I'm so glad, just literally today, he was like, Katie, I'm really worried that this is just like giving up. I was like, yeah, brilliant. Honestly, it's like, no, it's not giving up. It's giving up on the things you can't control, which is really strong and powerful. But I think there is a fear and a resistance that so the younger version of him would say, success is to win, whereas the adult version of him will say, success is to give my best and enjoy it. But the younger version is still in him saying, yeah, but that's not good enough. Trying hard is not good enough. You need to be the best. So there's like a quite immature thinking that is often within all of us to varying degrees. So I see quite a bit of fear, and like sometimes I can see even an athlete that looking at me going, that's dangerous. Not everyone grasps it as quickly as you did, Laurence. Like it still blows me away and like inspires me deeply hearing how you experienced that moment. But I actually don't think you're the norm. I think you're a bit of an exception, and it normally takes a lot more work.
Yeah.
It's about being open to those thinking patterns, isn't it? I think because I often see my work now in terms of thinking patterns and it's understanding them. So what you exposed there, yeah, was what's underlying
Mm,
the response or this win at all costs seeming sort of behavior that feels counterproductive, and it is being able to uncover those, isn't it? And there can be quite a few different routes that get us there. It might be the sort of perfectionist bit, or it might be what it was, the family drive.
mm.
It might be just learned because I've seen that's what someone else did, and so you almost have to kind of
Yeah,
find
find the
which
thread. Yeah.
which path you're unpicking the thought process. And yeah, it could be, it could be from a very early age, and then I guess that's harder.
Mm.
And I
So
think
interesting.
there's always tension with like these complex situations where you can have opposing ideas that are still both true at the same time. So like winning is important and winning is also not important. Like so part of the coaching is to help people recognize that and navigate that, like and how they choose to operate and live within that according to however they do. Like just to kind of give an example of where because I'd probably be a little bit closer to you, Katie, where I find that resistance quite a lot, bit for different reasons, but there's also like players who would see it as a profession and it's their job And actually fulfillment and meaning that they find in life is everything else. So like we've got one of the players I'm working with now, he's very open about like, I'm going to fight tooth and nail because I get an appearance bonus and I get a goal assist bonus. So I will do whatever I need to do to get that, because that then unlocks practically opportunities for me to go and do things with my kids. And that's where I will find peace and joy and happiness and everything else. So there's also like those bits as well that to manage. And there'll be so much more in terms of like contracts and things like that. So like I think part of
That's
this was like enabling choice. That's probably my main goal as a facilitator in these environments, is just like to pull the kind of veil up and be like, this is reality as you might see it. What do you want to go after and why, and what might the costs and benefits be of each approach? But I think what we're not getting at is a shifting of a vision where we're saying winning isn't important. It's winning isn't the only important thing, and you're willing perceptions and realities of your work that mean that winning has opportunities and consequences, losing has consequences, but how you choose to navigate that will be the thing that we can help you with. Don't just blindly fall into it and become
By the
part
way,
of
I'm having a mild panic attack, so I've just noticed we've only got 4 minutes to go. And there's all these amazing questions. And mainly I'm just thinking, is there a way that we can keep this conversation going with, not like tonight necessarily, because I'm mindful my kids might be like banging the door down, or hopefully they're asleep. But is there a way, like a community somehow, that Jen could help us create? Because like you guys, so much respect, you've given up your time on a whatever night it is, Wednesday evening. Maybe there's some kind of like Facebook group, or I don't know. I mean, maybe we don't all need another Facebook group, but would love to be able to keep this going and hear more from other people that are on the call. And
I can jump in quickly. Amy and I were talking in the new year because we've had multiple strands from each contribution that have led to impacts within the organization, their own personal life and their professional work. And we were talking about maybe a LinkedIn group for the books that
yeah,
people could offer.
oh, nice.
So it might bleed across different chapters. It might not be dedicated to this. So we'll have a chat, but in the first instance, thanks for that offer. That's fantastic to extend. And it is a topic that, as I said in the opening, it's close to me, the work I did in women's professional football around performance well-being, and trying to, connect all the notes and the messages. And I was gathering quotes that I was going to summarize with, and I thought everybody's taking what they want from this evening. They don't need to hear my thoughts, but just the importance of all those messages landing. We are at almost wrap up time, but would anybody like to share anything from the four of you initially in a wrap up without it being overly cheesy or two-word takeaways? But is there something you're holding on to before we leave that hasn't been said?
I think maybe let me just jump one thing that I sometimes see in the questions. There's this sense of, if it isn't that, is it this? Yeah, and I think
Yeah.
the whole thing is we're getting away from a binary mindset and we're coming into a explore world of possibility, which is actually what sport performance should be about. We're trying to do things that have never been done before at the highest levels of performance. So clearly we can't just have a recipe that's ready to go, given the complexity of human nature as well. So it is a mindset shift. It's not, oh, I change this measure for this one. And that is where it becomes more challenging when, public bodies got very narrow ways of measuring. Although I do believe that they could very easily embrace a different way of thinking about this. And eventually I hope they will. But for me, it's just that sort of take a step back to make sure we're not just trying to go, if it's not this, it's that. It's really then, that's the bigger gain, is this sort of deeper journey of human exploration that is going to take you, yes, to the podium potentially, but so much further in exploring what we're capable of. And we can't do that with such a sort of binary, narrow view of winning.
It's a mic drop. That's a mic.